Samstapakaya cha dharmasya Sarvadharmasvarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Vasudeva Sutang Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnang Vande Jagatgurum. So in the last class we were studying the 14th and the 15th verse of the 6th chapter of Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, where we found that the purity, the patience and the perseverance, the 3P which Swami Vivekananda speaks of as the sanam and the bonum of our spiritual journey, that was highlighted in the 14th and in the 15th verse of the 6th chapter of Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. As a quick recapitulation, what were the verses? Prashantatma vigatabhi brahmachari vrate sthitah manah sangyamya machitto yukta asita matpara. Prashantatma. So this is the very first qualification we need, the tranquil mind. Vigatavhi. We have to get rid of all sorts of emotions, of which fear is the thing which has been foremost. And we'll find in our life that when we are in the pursuit of the sensate pleasures of life, whether it be in the form of putraishana, vittaishana or yashaishana. So these are the three desires into which we can boil down all our worldly pursuits. The desire for progeny, the desire for wealth, the desire for name and fame. So they are bound to be associated with fear, with worries, with tension. Bound to be. Why? Because they are all something extraneous to me, external to me. As long as I haven't achieved them, the constant worry, the constant fear is there that I may not get it. And even when I have achieved them, again that fear is there, I may lose it. It may not be with me. Whether it is wealth, whether it is relation, whether it is our position in life. But when we are in the pursuit of our spiritual journey, it is something within. There is no question of losing. Once I develop the taste for it, the entire world may be something against me, but I know in my own mind, when I dive deep, I've developed that wonderful power of contemplation which has converted into devotion. No one can take it away from me. And that speaks of vigatabhi. You become fearless, that you have achieved something which no one can take away from you. And then this brahmachari vrate sthitah. As we mentioned in the last class, whenever we speak of brahmacharya, we always take it in the negative sense. What is the negative sense? That I have to forcefully stop the outgoing of my senses. I have to be very much controlled. Yes, that's the idea. But when I take it in that sense, know it for certain, we can never attain to the idea of chastity that has been spoken of in our scriptures. Why? Because as in the modern psychology they say that what you resist persists. The more you resist, it persists, because you are thinking of that. Constantly you are thinking of that. What you think, it creates an indelible mark in your mind, and that's the thing as a samskara. Creates a tremendous force and which impels us to continue with the way of life which we are going. Then what's the way out? The way out is think something positive. As the mind cannot have more than one thought at a time, the more I can keep my mind in some sublime thought, the other negativities are bound to fall off. So the more I think of Brahman, so Brahmachari, Brahme charati yah sa Brahmachari, the one who is constantly dwelling in Brahman, that it has become so habitual that the mind doesn't get scope to regress back to its old way of living. That's the real Brahmacharya. In the words of Sri Ramakrishna, the more you proceed towards the east, the west automatically falls behind. You cannot push the west. You have to just travel towards the east. So that's the way. So unless I know the way, I can never be established in what has been spoken of in the scripture. So when I translate it as chastity, it's correct. But thinking of chastity, if I always think I have to always subdue my senses, we will find that it is almost impossible. Because I'm thinking of the senses, that I have to subdue my senses. So think something positive. Then the other thoughts are bound to fall off. So what's the positive thing you have to think of? Of the Brahman, of the highest ideal, the spiritual dimension of my existence. Constantly I'm meditating on that. So the negativities naturally starts falling off. So that's the idea of Brahmachari Vrata, the resolution to dwell each and every moment of my life in the contemplation of Brahman. So naturally other things are bound to fall off. And then Mana Sanyamya. So that's how you are controlling your mind. The mind cannot be left vacuum. It has to be filled with something. So what's there to fill with? Mat para, mat chitta. Mana Sanyamya, mat chitta. By keeping the mind in me, dwelling in the Lord, dwelling constantly in the Parabrahman, the one who is the core of our being. So that's the mat chitta. And then yukta. Yukta speaks of yoga. Yukta means in conjunction, in union. So my mind is constantly dwelling on myself, on the Lord. So that is yukta. Asita mat paraha. As in the last class we were saying, mat para means when I am dwelling on myself, I know it for certain there is no other thing in this world on which I can depend as a support. That's the only support. Everything can fall off. But my union with the self, my companionship, the eternal companionship with the divine, that's something no one can take away. I may not know it. The one who is ignorant, he doesn't know it. Even such a person is always in association with the divine, because that's the core of his being. So spirituality is not gaining something. We have forgotten something which we already have. It is just the remembrance of our forgetfulness. What I have forgotten, I just remember. So I have to not gain something. Already I have that. So that's the idea of the Matpara, the core of my being with which I am always in communion. I have to be aware with that. As Sri Ramakrishna very nicely used to say, that in the let me just say the Bengali word and then I will translate. Bhagavan সর্বভূতে রয়েছেন, তবে আমি ভক্ত বলি কাকে, যে তাতে রয়েছে. Very nice. That God is in each and every being. Then who is the devotee? The one who resides in him. God resides in everyone. But are we residing in God? We are forgetful about it. So very simple words. Bhagavan সর্বভূতে রয়েছেন, তবে ভক্ত বলি কাকে, যে তাতে রয়েছে. The one who is residing in him. And that's the idea of mat chitta mat para. So to always remember the divine communion which nothing can sever. It's always there. So to be always established in the presence of the divine, the practicing of the presence of God, is the only thing in our spiritual life. In all our activities, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, let God be just like your toothache. That when I have a toothache, whatever activities I am doing, the toothache occupies a portion of my mind. I can never forget about it. Let the God be like that. It always occupies a portion of your mind in all your activities. And again, in the words of Sri Ramakrishna, as long as we have responsibilities, let us hold on to the Lord in one hand, and with the other hand, let us do our activities. And when I am free, then with both the hands, hold on to the Lord. So this is as simple as that. But never with both the hands hold on to the world. One hand always should be holding the Lord. With other hand, you can go on doing your activities. Will not my activities be affected that way? No. As Swami Brahmananda used to say, that if you can keep most of your mind established in the Lord, with just a small fraction of your mind, if you do your activities, the activities will be much more qualitative. Know it for certain. Because your mind is at peace. It is not in any way disturbed. So keep most of the mind with the Lord. And with a fraction of the mind, when you are taking care of the activities, that is sufficient. That will take care of all our so-called worldly duties and responsibilities. So after saying that, in the 15th verse, what he said? Yunjan nevam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasa shanting nirvana paramam mat sangstham adhigacchati. So yunjan nevam, so always keeping the mind steadfast. Yunjan nevam sada atmanam. So keeping the mind always fixed in yourself. Yogi niyatamanasa. So it's constantly, his mind is niyata. It's not that whenever I feel like my mood is, I meditate, other time I am distracted. It's good. At the beginning of our spiritual journey, it's not possible to always keep the mind in the Lord. As again in the words of Ramakrishna, a novice is just like a housefly, an ordinary housefly. Sometimes it sits on filth, sometimes it sits on nectar. But as we progress in our spiritual journey, our mind becomes like a bee. It sits only in the nectar. It doesn't sit on the filth. So that's the idea of niyata manasa. That gradually we have to keep our mind more and more in the Lord. That should become the habitual state of our existence. And then only it can take you to the highest spiritual realization. And which speaks of that ultimate shanti. And nothing else in this world can give us that shanti, that peace. Shanting nirvana paramam. That through your contemplation of the Lord, at last, when even your ego falls off, it takes you to that sampragyata samadhi. That as we mention again and again, that all the contemplation, when it leads to so much of focus, that even I am meditating, I also forget that egos, a part of my mind is always hooked to the ego. I can never forget that I am this limited individuality. But when my mind is focused, I find that all things starts falling off. External distractions falls off when I'm watching a TV. Though the sound is entering your ear, it doesn't register your mind because your mind is focused on something. If you're still more focused, you will find you forget about your food, forget about that you're tired, forget you're thirsty. It happens, we find. The thing which we like, I can continue for hours together. Because all the bodily these feelings, they're like the bodily alarm system. But the mind it doesn't have the capacity to take care of that. It cannot register. It is so focused. So they fall off. So you continue in that state, in a state of flow. The last thing to fall off is your ego. It always is hooked to a small part of your mind. But this intense meditation, when that comes out through that love, that focus, at last helps us to get rid of that ego. This intensity even we cannot think of in our ordinary love. Only in your spiritual life, A highly evolved soul can get that type of focus. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say very nicely, when three types of most intense emotions that we feel in this life, they combine together, then think of that intensity. When you have that type of intensity for the love of God, then only you realize Him. What are the three most intense love or emotion that we can think of in human life? The mother's love for the child. Think of that intensity. Add up with the intensity of a miserly person's love for wealth. Add up with that. And then a chaste wife's love for his husband. Add up these three. These are the three intense type of love we can think of in this world. Try to add up. Think of the tremendous intensity. It happens with the divine love. Why it happens? Because Vigata Bhi is such a thing, it doesn't depend on anything external. So I've created a bypass in my mind. I'm constantly traveling that, leaving out all other distractions. And in the mind, the more you traverse a path, the more the groove deepens, and the more love you develop for doing this, traveling that path again and again. That's how we have developed all our love and obsessions. This divine love becomes very intense. And then it leads to that Nirvana Shanti Parama. That when your ego falls off, you become one with the divine. Immediately what happens? There are so many desires, innumerable desires, of some of which I am aware. They are manifested. I am aware of them. And many are hidden in my psyche. When I get favorable circumstances, those hidden, they also come out. Generally, I think that to get rid of the desires, I have to take care of them one by one. I can never that way get rid of all the desires. That's innumerable. Vyakta, avyakta. So what's the way? Now all these desires are hooked to the ego with the idea that I am this limited being. I like this, I like that, I hate this, I'm afraid of this. With everything, I is linked. And that I has been taken away by your awareness of the divine. When in deep meditation, you become one with the object of meditation, the ego has fallen off. And then all the desires which are hooked to the ego collapses. As we give that example again and again. Or if I compare my personality with a wheel, then the hub of the wheel is the ego, and all the spikes are the innumerable desires. Some of them are vyakta, manifested, some are avyakta, unmanifested. That's what is my personality. If one spike breaks, still the wheel is intact. But if I remove the hub, the entire wheel collapses. And that speaks of nirvana, that extinction of all your desires. Because your love of the divine has enabled you to forget your ego and merge yourself in the divine. And then all the desire falls off just in one go. And that's what is speaking of nirvana. And how it happens? Mat sangstham adhigacchati, by being established in me. So that's the idea of the sampragyata samadhi in yoga. So now it speaks of 3P in all. Why? It needs assiduous practice, gradually, perseverance, so that this practice becomes niyata manasa, one-pointed. So naturally the idea comes, as we find in all our spiritual traditions, we give too much importance to severe austerity. But after this saying that yes, we need this tremendous perseverance, that doesn't in any way indicate self-mortification. This is the idea. You shouldn't go to that extreme where you self-mortify. As we will say that, what's the idea that Swami Vivekananda in God in Everything, that lecture, he's saying that in a spiritual journey, sometimes in our intention to get rid of all the desires, we start harming ourselves. And he's to give in God in Everything, that example he's giving, that a king asked his trained monkey one day that when I am sleeping, just see that I am not disturbed by any fly or mosquitoes. Please just see that. So now when the monkey was just sitting by the side of the king, and the king was having a nice nap, and suddenly a fly started just moving around. And the monkey again and again was trying to be quite swift to get hold of that, but the fly was more swift, as you know. So at last the fly sat on the nose of the king, and now the monkey thought, now this time I have to somehow get rid of this, I have to kill this fly. So he got hold of his sword in his hand. The king's sword was lying there, and with that he gave a blow. So now you can understand what will happen. So that's the thing Swamiji is saying happens in the name of self-mortification. That instead of serving ourselves, we kill ourselves. So what's the way out? As even Gautam Buddha has indicated, it is Madhya Pantha, taking the middle path. Don't get too much involved with the senses, just get engrossed with the sensate pleasures of the life, nor at the same time mortify yourself. Follow the middle path. So Buddha himself, you will find that he took the resolution, let my body dry off. Ihasane shushyate me shariram. Let the body, just let this flesh and everything disintegrate. But till I attain Bodhi, I am not going to get up from this seat. And he becomes so emaciated, without taking food, without having the bare sustenance which is required for his body. He becomes so emaciated, at last he didn't have the energy even to walk. He was so exhausted. And that's the time when we find the village girl Sujata. She was going to the forest to offer some offering to the forest deity, and seeing Buddha emaciated lying there, she felt like giving the offering to Buddha. So he gave that rice porridge to Buddha. Eating that, Buddha got that energy, and then he goes and have a dip in the river, and then comes and sits under the Bodhi tree to attain that liberation, attain the final nirvana. And when he comes back, then he propounds this idea, this Madhya Pantha. Don't self-mortify, because this is this body with the help of which we have to attain the liberation. So neither you should indulge too much in the senses, nor you should mortify. Buddha used to give a very nice example that of a stringed instrument, stringed musical instrument. The example of that. What's that? That if you tighten the string too much, if the string is tensed, if you try to play on the tense string, it will tear off. It will snap. And if it is loose, it is not properly tightened, you won't get any music out of it. Then what's the way out? So it has to be properly tuned, exactly properly tuned, neither too tight nor too slack. Then only you can play the music. So he is saying that our body is like that stringed instrument. Neither tighten it too much nor allow it to be slack. So this is the thing which even in this Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna will be indicating after saying that you have to do lot of assiduous practices, but it shouldn't lead to self-mortification. So that is indicated, so follow the middle path. That is indicated in the 16th and in the 17th verse of the 6th chapter. What it is saying? Na atyashnata astu yoga, na ati ashnata astu yoga, asti nacha ekantam anashnatah, nachati swapna shilasya jagrata naiva charjuna. So ashnata, then if you are not supposed to fast constantly, that was as Buddha's life we find he got emaciated. That yogi is not a person who eats too much, and anashnata is fasting. He doesn't eat for long periods. Both the extremes has to be avoided. That's neither he's indulging too much in food, nor he's just without food for a long period. And then nachati swapna silasya, he doesn't sleep too much. Jagrata naiva charya, or it's not that he's just keeping himself awake throughout the night. So nothing will help him that way. These extremes won't help him. He has to keep his body in a healthy condition, mind in a calm state. Then only he can think of a spiritual journey. So avoid the extreme. And then the next, after speaking that you avoid the extreme, what Bhagavan is saying, yukta hara viharasya yukta chestasya karmasu. Yukta ahara vihara. Your food habit should be balanced. Yukta, it should be temperate. Vihara, all your recreation is also required, but it should be in balance. Even this recreation is very important. So many times we point out that you will find that even in the education system here, that from the Asian background, generally the parents will be always asking their children, focus, study. And we do find it helps. How it helps? Here in all the 12th standard exam, even in Australia, you will find it's the Asians who are the toppers. The Sri Lankans, Indians, they are the toppers. But what happens in the university when you go to the research? How many scientists do you find Indians? How many? Real research work, how many Asians do you get? Really exalted. So what has happened? That the modern psychology will also say that when I'm focusing my mind, I gather informations. I'm gathering the informations. But I have to be relaxed for all the informations which I gather. They are just intermingling with each other. They have to process themselves. Which idea will go with which idea to really create a wonderful new discovery or invention? We don't know. Just to give an example, that why in the dream state we see all sort of ambiguous thing. They say when you are sleeping, your mind is relaxed, the forebrain becomes inactive, not the hindbrain. Now hindbrain is the storehouse of all your information. So when the forebrain is inactive, now the hindbrain becomes like a classroom where the teacher is not there. It's not there. So it's chaotic. Students are all jumping they are supposed to sit in a particular place, they are not in their particular place, they are jumping, going to some other bench. It's a chaos. So in the dream state is actually like that chaos. All the impressions in the hindbrain, they just start just interacting with each other without any proper supervision. So, as an example, even in our scripture it is given that in our wakeful state, when I'm awake, I have never seen a mountain made of gold. I have never seen. But in the dream state, I have the idea of gold, the impression of gold is there, the impression of mountain is there, but there is no one to monitor, and these two ideas can easily coalesce. And so you can see a mountain made of gold. Of course you can see. So what it speaks of, when you're not focused, then all the impressions which you have gathered, they get the chance to coalesce, jumble up. Most of them are useless. They lead to fantasies and other things. But some can be really revolutionary. That can bring a huge change in the entire society, civilization, the discoveries. So this relaxation is something which we never give importance to. So someone who has a passion for studies, no one has pressurized him, he can know that balance. Yes, he's studying and he's giving some recreation. No one is there to force him to study. And that's why we find that when it goes to the research work, you'll find then the Asians who are actually trained to focus always, they are lacking because they have only a definite way of thinking. They cannot think out of the box. They don't allow the mind to interact. So this vihara, this it's not only in spiritual life, even in your secular life, it is very much important. So this yukta ahara, vihara is also required. This do play a great role in our evolution. yukta ahara, and recreation is also required. But it should be balanced, not too much, not overindulgence, not I'm just so focused that I don't give importance to vihara at all. So yukta ahara, viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu. Or at all our endeavor should also be balanced. There should be a balance between our endeavor and relaxation. So yukta cheshta, yukta vihara. And yukta sapna avabodhasya. So this again, this sleep and avabodhasya is wakefulness. So that also, the wakefulness, there's a balance between the sleep and your wakefulness. And then only yoga can be the destroyer of all your suffering, of your misery. Yoga bhavati dukkhaha. Dukkhaha means the ha is used to indicate the end, the annihilation of dukkha, of misery. Then only yoga can destroy your misery. Otherwise, yoga will lead to misery. You don't know how to use this power of yoga. That just a fire can burn us, it can cook our food, how we use it. So here the yoga also can, instead of integrating our life, can disintegrate. There are many cases. You will find that us becoming overzealous. Just think, I will be meditating 24 hours. In the spiritual journey, we have seen, even in our organization it happens. Give too much importance to meditation, that I will be sitting for meditation for hours. And sometimes we find they do develop all those mental derangement. So we have to be very cautious. We have to give a balance between our endeavor and our relaxation. There should be proper balance. And that's the thing Bhagavan is indicating after speaking of that assiduous spiritual journey, so that we don't go to that other extreme. And now, from this 18 and 19, we'll deal with the process and the technique of meditation. And these are the very few important verses of the 6th chapter. So as the 6th chapter deals with Dhyana Yoga, so again and again, so after warning, again he's coming back to the process of meditation. So how the process of meditation is going to help us to the ultimate realization. That's what actually the spiritual practices are. If I just try to categorize all the practices into some broad categories, there are only two things in our spiritual journey. There's abhyasa and vairagya. You have to renounce certain thing and practice certain thing. This is the two things, abhyasa and vairagya. So that you will find is indicated here in this 18th verse. What it is saying? Yada viniyatam chittam atmanye vavatishtate. It speaks of abhyasa. That my chitta, I am constantly placing it in my Atman, there's the core of Atmani eva avatishtate, Atmani eva avatishtate, Atmani eva, it is always residing in yourself. So for that speaks of a abhyasa, practice. And the second part speaks of the vairagya. What is that? Nispriya, sarva kamebhya. By renouncing all the desires, by being detached from all the desires, yukta ityuchyate. Such a person is established in the self alone. So when the completely controlled mind rests serenely in the self and free from longing after desires, then one is called to be established in the self. The entire spiritual journey has been spoken of in this verse. Two things. One is nispriya sarva kamebhya. Now I cannot be nispriya about sarva kama. Why? Because as we were saying, that all the desires I'm not aware of. That most probably I do like donut. But when I am sitting here and just in the class, that idea is not there at all. It is there, the desire is there, but it is dormant. Now after the class, when I am going out, I'm just driving and I see the donut king, just that vision, and immediately the desire comes up. So this is vyakta avyakta. So I can take care of the vyakta vasana. I cannot take care of the avyakta, which is not manifested. I cannot take care. It is hidden. When it will spring up, I don't know. That was a funny example which we give, that we believe in evolution. We believe in transmigration. That we have evolved and at the same time transmigrated. Most probably, we are, of course, if we have this evolution is there and transmigration is there, then in some previous birth, we were some crazy animal. Of course, we were some crazy animal. some maybe 3 birds, 10 birds, somewhere. And it is said in our scripture that whatever samskaras, latent impressions we have in our mind, they never get deleted. Just like your computer, whatever you have saved, it is there. Unless you really deliberately delete it, it is there. You have saved it. So all the impressions are saved in our psyche. Now, a very interesting thing, that if everything is saved in our psyche, then as a grazing animal, I used to graze on grass. Seeing the grass, I used to salivate. That impression is in my mind. As a human being, I am supposed to salivate seeing the grass. Because if nothing is lost, it is still there, I am supposed to salivate. But I never salivate. Very nicely the yoga has dealt with. They say, very interesting, that in each and every birth, whatever desires are favorable for that birth, that manifests, others are all hidden. Just like a student in school may be good in all the subjects, may be very much passionate about extracurricular activities like singing and his games. But as he goes to the higher class, most probably in the 12th year, his grades allows him to get admitted in the medical college. Now what will happen? His interest in all the subject was there in the school. But now this new place, this medical college, this new environment, that will force him to, forget about all other subjects for the time being. His interest in only the biological science will be more predominant. That will be predominant. So the same thing happens. The birth in which we are, whatever is favorable for that birth, only those desires manifest, others are avyakta. So now how can I take care of the avyakta vasana? I cannot take care. So when the scriptures say nispriha sarva kamebhya, it's speaking of only the vyakta vasana. That whatever desires are disturbing you, that if in the spiritual life I think, I know very well that it's a meditation and meditation alone that can speak of my spiritual evolution. And I find that whenever I sit for meditation, it is distracted by the vyakta vasanas, all the manifested desires. And you will find whenever we sit for meditation, that's the time all the things, the things with which we are engaged, they come and crowd our mind. It's a big challenge. That a very nice story, it's a very funny story, that a monk, he's a wandering monk. One day, so he always travels from village to village. So he was in a village for a few days, and the shopkeeper there, the shopkeeper of that village, seeing that monk, somehow he developed the desire to get initiated. So he went and prayed to the monk, please initiate me. The monk agreed. He was initiated. And now he was a wandering monk. So after initiating, after a few days, he left that village. And no one has seen that monk for years together. Where he has went, no one knows. After 12 years, again he came back to that village after a long time. And this shopkeeper recognized his own guru. He went running to his guru, fell flat at his feet and told, oh, what a great help you have done to me. And this guru thought most probably has evolved spiritually. Well, what help I have done to you? And then what he told was really interesting. That previously, before the initiation, people in the village, they take always the things, they always will be in depth. That after that, in the end of the month, we will pay you. So they used to take the things in depth, and the shopkeeper used to forget that to whom what he has given in loan. What are the things he has given in loan, he has to forget. And after I got the initiation, every day I sit for meditation, and then all that who has taken what, everything, I forget nothing. It all comes to my mind. So that's that's the meditation we have. When you sit, then all these things are coming. So what's the way? So all the vyakta vasana, we have to consciously take care of to calm down the mind, isn't it? Otherwise I cannot calm down the mind. But that is not sufficient. Yes, most probably I have developed the capacity to calm down my mind by taking care of the vyakta vasana. But in future, the avyakta vasanas are there. If they get favorable circumstances, they will again pop up in my mind. So what I have to do now? Practice. What's the practice? That constantly think of the self. This thinking of the self should become so intense, as we were saying at last, that you forget your ego. you become one with the object of meditation. The hub is removed. And then all the vasanas, they fall off all at a time. So first I take care of the Vyakta Vasana to calm down my mind, otherwise I cannot meditate. But this is just a temporary, a short-term relief. The long-term relief comes in the meditation now. Just whenever there is a flood, there are two types of relief. That immediately I go and just give food and shelter, try to shift those people, that is short-term relief. But I know that if a place is flood-prone and someone has built their house there, so what's the long-term service? We will go, in Ramakrishna Mission we do. We will build up the entire village. And the houses will be such that they are built on pillars. Ground floor, no one stays. You have to climb the stairs and then only you have to go to the level in which you are staying. The this pump, water pump, in villages in India still it's there. So if it is in the ground, when the flood is there, it is just below the waters. So we will build the pump in a high pedestal. We will raise the pedestal and the stairs you go, so that even village is flooded with water, the pump is above the water level. So you get the fresh water. So when the flood is there, everywhere water is there, but it's all polluted water. So to get the fresh water, you have that level. The school building should be 2-3 stories, so that even if the water is too high, at least the villagers can go and take shelter in the school building. So all those measures, these are long term. So in spiritual journey also, this too, the short term is to immediately first we have to calm down the mind by having a control over the Vyakta Vasana. That speaks of this Nispriya Sarva Kamebhya. Now I can focus my mind. With this, I improve the quality of my meditation to such an extent that it goes at last to a state where I am forgetful about myself. I become one with the object of meditation. That speaks of falling off of the ego. All the spikes collapses together because the hub has been removed. And that takes you to the ultimate spiritual realization. So just see this one sloka. Speaks of the entire spiritual journey. So let's read it again. Yada viniyatam chittam atmani eva avatishthate. So you're keeping your mind constantly in the self. Nispriha sarva kamebhya. That speaks of this vairagya. Nispriha sarva kamebhya. So resting, sealing in the self alone, free from all longing after all the desires which is disturbing us. Then what happens? Yukta ityuchyate. Then such a person is established in the self. So this concentration should be something which never wavers. So that all the desires has to fall off. Then only I can have the concentration which is not wavered, flickered by the so-called the disturbance of the senses. That's indicated in the 19th verse. What it is saying? Yatha deepo nivatastha nengate sopama smrita yogina yata chittasya yunjata yogam atmana. So as a lamp, yatha deepo nivatastha. Nivat means where there is no air. Air is there is no wind. Without air, the lamp cannot burn, the light cannot be there. So air is there, but the wind is there, not there. So where there is no wind, she has been sheltered from the wind. So then what happens? Then you find the flame is not flickering. Nengate sopamas. So this is the upama. This is the example of the unflickering mind. What is the upama? That as the way when the lamp is protected from the wind with a glass or whatever it may be, so that the flame doesn't flicker. Similarly, in meditation, the mind, this is the allegory which we use, in the same way, the mind has to be unflickering, undisturbed by the wind of desires. Yogina yata chittasya yunjato yogam atmana. So, for a mind of for a yogi of the subdued mind, yogina yata chittasya, he has subdued his mind. So that's the example for practicing concentration in the self. Yunjata yogam atmana. So that's how you have to yunjata. You means connect yourself with Atman. That's the process of yoga. So this actually you'll find that Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the 8 limbs of yoga, is actually enunciated through all these verses. So what are the steps we have followed here: pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. Pratyahara, prati ahara. Ahara means to gather in. Ahara doesn't mean only food. Food is also something we are gathering in. But what we see is also ahara. We are gathering in through sight, through sound, through our taste, through our smell, through our touch. So these are all ahara. So pratyahara means just the opposite. I don't allow the gathering in of the senses. So they stop that. That alone, then only I can think of dhyana. And dhyana ripens into dharana. What's the difference between dhyana and dharana? Many people just think it is the same. It's not, it's all the same thing. That we say that if it's dhyana is something like a low resolution picture, low DPI, dots per inch. Once your mind has started getting focused, but the frequency of the mind residing in one thought is still less. So the picture which you are forming, the visualization we are forming in the mind is something hazy. That when our Guru says, meditate on the Ishta, I say it's so difficult, I cannot. It's very hazy because DPI is very low. The constant thought of your Ishta has not yet developed that intensity. Just in a picture. And in a picture with high DPI, the picture, it's actually made of dots. But to me, it appears as a continuous, an analogous picture, an analogous form. There's no as if any dots, I cannot see the dots because there's the dot per inch is so high. It has almost formed a continuous picture. So that's what is dharana. So through meditation, gradually we have to develop that intensity till it takes to the samadhi. The ultimate samadhi is where your idea, that ego also falls off. You become one with the object of meditation. So this is the thing which speaks of that unflickering flame. If all constantly your mind is being disturbed, you can never have that. So that have that meditation where nothing is disturbing you. So the process of the entire spiritual journey has thus been spoken of in the 18th and in the 19th verse. So after that, in the three verses, 20, 21, 22, he will speak of certain conditions that if you have these attributes, you have developed these states, then it will lead you to the ultimate yoga, which at last will end all your suffering. So what we are going to gain through yoga, so that at last that will be mentioned in the 23rd verse, it will annihilate all our suffering. That will be mentioned in the 23rd. But how all the suffering will be annihilated, what all steps we will be following at last to annihilate the suffering, what all milestones we will be attaining till we at last for which the suffering will be ended. Those milestones, 6 milestones, will be spoken of in 20, 21 and in the 22 verse. So for the aim of yoga is Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti Parama Sukha Prapti. So to end all suffering and to get the happiness which is uninterrupted, Parama Sukha. So how to attain that? So the 6 states will be spoken of from the 20 to the 22nd. What are they? First, Yatra, the 20th verse. Yatra uparate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya. Yatra chaivat manatmanam pashyan atmani tushyati. So the first line, Yatra uparate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya. It speaks of the pratyahara. So the mind absolutely restrained. Uparati. Uparati speaks of that restrained mind. Yatra uparate chittam. The mind has been restrained. Niruddham yoga sevaya. Through the practice of yoga, you have now developed that habitual quietude. You can keep your mind calm and quiet without much effort. It speaks of the state of Vishuddha Sattva. These terms are very interesting. Pure Sattva, without any Rajas and Tamas. What it speaks of? That when for the first time I am trying to meditate, my mind is restless. After assiduous practice, most probably to a certain extent my mind calms down. It was full of rajas, activity. It calmed down a little, but you cannot stay in that state of calmness. Immediately you will find you have started dozing off. So, this rajas goes to the state of tamas. To stay alert in your meditation, that's the sattva. That needs practice. At the beginning, we all will find that the restless mind, somehow if I calm down, it goes to a state of a drowsiness. Sometimes we feel that's a very high state. We feel because somehow the clattering of the mind has stopped. It has taken to a state which gives me a type of rest. I come out, I feel refreshed. I think I got good meditation. But you have to be very much aware. Most of the time, it takes us to the state of tamas. So again and again through practice, we have to keep our mind in that awareness. That awareness shouldn't go. That it shouldn't go to the state of laziness and slothness. It should be aware of your object of meditation. So that's the state called Vishuddha Sattva. You have to continue in that state. So that's been mentioned as this yoga seva, niruddham, by stopping the mind from the vagaries as well as from going to the state of dullness or slothness. Keeping your mind fixed in the object of meditation, that's the yoga. The second line, what is saying? Yatra chaivat manatmanam pashyan atmani tushyati. With the Atman, seeing the Atman. What it actually means? If you really read these lines between the lines, you get this wonderful idea of our philosophy, and which actually Swami Vivekananda used to say a very wonderful thing, that the study of the Vedanta should be encouraged. Why? That the more the scientific discoveries are there, you will find at last the Vedantic truths are getting established. And all the dross, all the things, superstitions, which has somehow accrued along with these core scriptures, they will fall off. They will be washed off. But the core thing will shine forth. They will shine forth. See, in the modern psychology, it's a very interesting study that the hallucinating brain, whatever I'm seeing is actually hallucination. The red flower, is the red flower outside which I'm seeing? No. Even we can explain a small child, the light doesn't go to the brain. The brain is perfectly dark. What happens when the light falls on the flower? It's reflected, falls on my eyes. What is falling on my eyes is a particular wavelength. It has no color. No color. And when it touches the retina of my eye, the function of the light stops there. The wavelength just touches the retina. It cannot go to my brain. But that wavelength gets converted into a nerve impulse, a nerve current. It's like electricity of a particular frequency. That's going to the so-called color perception center. Color is not perceived. It is perceiving as particular stimuli. And that also has been converted into a nerve impulse. And that particular frequency of nerve impulse, when it goes to that so-called color center, the color is projected from the mind. The mind being in association with the self. It is the self it's like a projector. The self is projected through the mind in the form of color to go outside and make me feel that the flower is red. So whatever I'm seeing, Vedanta is very interesting. Thousands of years back, if you read Vedanta Sara, this is the idea. The self through the senses moving out breaks the ajnana of the thing and enlightens about the thing. They call it Tula Ajnana, that each and everything has a relative ignorance. The ultimate ignorance is about the self, that is the Mula Ajnana. And what is the Tula Ajnana? About the flower there is an ignorance. How that ignorance is broken? The self projects through the mind and the senses to illumine the world as we are seeing. So it is the self which is projected as the universe of this name and form. So that's being constantly in our Vedanta, they're asserting that fact. And now when I say seeing the self by the self, what it means? I'm not allowing the self to project to the mind and senses and being projected outside as the universe. I have done pratyahara. I have closed my science. Then what happens? The self is no more projected through the mind and self. It is residing in itself. So just see the wonderfully this all these ideas. To just say that, to translate it, that self residing in the self, we will say, okay, you are meditating. But if you just try to understand it word by word, what a wonderful idea it is giving. That the entire world which I am saying is nothing but the self. This self projected through the mind and senses is appearing as the world. It is like a prism. Our mind is like a prism. White light is falling on it. It is getting into the spectrum of 7 colors. And that's what the world is. This world is nothing but the spectrum of name and form. Don't allow the mind to be projected through the prism called mind. Don't allow the self to be projected through the prism called mind. Let it reside on itself. For that, what I have to do? I have to stop the interaction with the world and then focus on the self. So that's the idea. Chaiva atmana atmanam pashyan atmani tushyati. So seeing the self by the self, one is established in his own self. So not allowing it to project out. So you will find, even in our Indian temple, that whenever there is an offering to the deity, there will be so many gates around the sanctum sanctorum. Even in Belur Math, if you go, there was the main Garbhagriha, you find exactly 9 gates are there. So in our scriptures they say, Navadware Pure Dehi. The Dehi, the Atman, he's residing in this Deha. Atman is the Dehi and this body is the Deha. And the one who is residing, he is residing in a Puri, in a city which has 9 gates. What are the 9 gates? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils. 6. Mouth. 7. Organ of evacuation and organ of procreation. So 9. So these are the 9 gates through which the one who is residing here can move out and interact with the world. But to interact with itself, what it has to do? It has to first close these 9 gates. Then only you can interact with the self. So that's why you will find a wonderful thing. Even our ritualistic practices are not meaningless. You will find that when there is an offering done in the shrine, you have gone to the shrine, you are in the Nat Mandira, and you find the Garbhagriha is closed, all the doors are closed, the 9 doors are closed. And you ask, why the doors are closed? Won't the shrine open? So the one who are the sevaks there, the priests there, they will say, no, please wait. Half an hour you wait. The service is going on, isn't it? So what's the idea? If you have to commune with the self, if you have the service means what? You are communing with the self. You are communing with the deity. Who is the core of your being. If you have to commune with him, first you have to close all the external gates. So this shrine actually is a personification of the human body. So in the sanctum sanctorum, in that where your deity is sitting, first close all the senses, then only you can be communing with the self. And that's the idea, is this Chaiva Atmana Atmanam. So when you're residing with the self, first close all your interaction with the world, that pratyahara, and then you be in communion with the self. So that's the idea which is spoken of in the 20th verse. So the 2 ideas, this first pratyahara and then this dharana and dhyana and dharana, is been spoken of in these 2 lines. That how gradually you are going to go beyond all the suffering. So these are the first 2 aspects spoken on the 20th verse. The 21st will speak of another 2 aspects, 22nd, the last another 2, total 6. And then only you can go beyond all misery. So we will take all those other 4 aspects again in the next class. So with this, we stop for discussion today. Thank you all.